Hello and welcome to The Birth of a New Dimension. My name is Aurora, and today on this show I'm going to speak all about our chakra system or energy centers, the way that we are shaped and formed in a non-physical reality, how that is a refinery of consciousness and how it is refining us towards certain personality characteristics. So if you take time to look at some of my paintings or some of my diagrams and the drawings that I use to communicate, and you can do that easily, brief plug for me by going to flyingrainbowlasagne.com and clicking on the art tab. And if you take any of my webinars also, you will understand that I draw these shorthand diagrams all the time. And what I draw is the time vortex. So here on the radio, I will describe it with my voice. This is for anyone who is new to my work. For people that are long-standing listeners, thank you for tuning in each week. So the idea is that the time vortex is 1/4 or 1/6 of the overall energy center or chakra shape. And that it is represented, it's like a bundle of timelines. And the idea I'm trying to get across is that one's non-physical presence, the part of you that isn't just your physical body that we can touch and hear and smell with our five senses, that there is a large part of you that is your time body. And it is comprised of possibilities and probabilities. And that by becoming a virtuoso of understanding and controlling that time body, you can achieve health and vitality and transcend the necessity of death. That when you look at the time vortex, what I draw, if it's in cross-section, I use this little cross-section shorthand all the time, it might look like the shape of a Hershey's Kiss that has been cut in half with a broad base and sloping sides and a pointy top. And the sloping sides are literally a membrane that separates different layers of reality. It's a flowing membrane that's made up of energy, like the way that a waterfall is made up of flowing water. And this flowing membrane of energy, I call it the membrane of death. It is where all of the timelines and the timeline bundle that comprises your life, the possibilities of your life, all of the timelines end on that membrane. So for anyone who is interested in vortex-based math, and this is a wonderful new system for visualizing math popularized by Marco Rodin, and you can find lots of wonderful videos all about it. The relevance here is that vortex-based math uses the torus or donut shape and the skin of the torus as being like a numerical map. And in similar to Sudoku, if you have ever played that numbers game, each sector on the wrapped skin of the torus has to contain a certain number of digits and not repeat, and it has to integrate with all of the other cells or digits that are next to it. So there are, I'm using so many words to try to describe this, but if you research this, you'll see what I'm talking about. A series and a pattern of numbers that is on the skin of the torus that represents the possible numerical combinations of this math system. So this relates to my work in that the skin of the torus is the membrane of death. And those terminations of your timelines are like the particular combinations of those numbers. That really what we're looking at when we look at the membrane of death is a series of combinations of ideas and behaviors and events and genetic structures that are frozen in that last moment. I call it the final denouement. This is like the ending of a movie, is its final denouement. And that last moment of life, when a person hits the membrane of death, that is like the last moment or the last frame in the movie of your life. And so there's special things that happen with that last moment. A brief pause while I save my work. So first of all, that last moment comprises or has as its implication all of the other moments that have led up to that moment. So if your last moment on a particular timeline is you jumping out of a plane for a parachute ride on your birthday and finding out that your parachute doesn't actually open and plummeting into the ground, that last moment only could have unfolded or come into existence if your friend had actually bought you that gift certificate to go skydiving on your birthday, and you actually took them up on it, and you actually went into the plane, and you actually jumped out of the plane. And all of the events leading up to the meeting of your friend finding out that it's your birthday, and all of the events leading up to that. So I'm just using that as a very macroscopic, gross example of ideas and behaviors and possibilities and probabilities that lead up to the final moment when a person actually dies. Now, I have also described the adventure of navigating the time field as being similar to one of those old choose-your-own-adventure novels that you might have gone through when you were a kid in grade school. And if you've never gone through them, they're narrative structures where you face decision-making cusps or forks in the road. And when you come to a fork in the road, the book asks you, for example, if you're in this narrative structure, you're walking down a pathway, and the pathway forks to the left and forks to the right. If you choose to go to the left, turn to page 3. If you choose to go to the right, turn to page 27, because dependent upon that choice, the story changes. If you go to the left, you might meet a dragon that eats you alive, or if you turn to the right, you might meet a beautiful princess, or whatever serves the story. So the idea is that, as I use this analogy, as we are navigating the time field, we have all of these different branching possibilities that represent different pathways in our life. And based upon the choices that we make, and not only the choices that we make, but also our expectations, like our pre-programmed or inborn foundation expectations of how reality functions and what we feel and think is possible, that this combination of behavior and belief system and other factors are what place us on a particular timeline. And I've portrayed this as a type of trial and error science experiment where we are all within the petri dish of our own lives trying to come up with the exact set of ideas and behaviors and thoughts and actions that all lead up to us avoiding the membrane of death. Because if we were to look at this time vortex diagram from the top down, so now it's like if it's shaped like a Hershey's kiss and I'm looking at it from the top down and the little pointy end is facing towards my eye, the entire structure looks like a round object, like a bullseye. And the little pointy end is right at the center of the bullseye. Well, that pointy end happens to be the place where the fabric of time, space, and consciousness is stretched to the point of infinity. So science speaks about the fabric of time and space, or conventional physics speaks about the fabric of time and space. And I add in the element of consciousness, something which science is not yet prepared to touch with a 10-foot clown pole, because it's very difficult to measure it, difficult to quantify it. How much does your consciousness weigh? How long or how wide is your consciousness? How tall is your consciousness? If we cannot talk about things like that or measure it in those terms, most scientists back away slowly. They say, I don't feel comfortable with this concept, and I think that's fair. However, consciousness affects our experience of flying through time, our subjective experience of the flow of time, like how long a moment lasts or how quickly time is flowing, and consciousness has everything to do with which path we actually choose. So if each one of these time pathways is like a groove on a record, our awareness is the needle on the record. And it's our belief system and the choices that we make and other aspects of consciousness that are within our own control, within our own willpower, that determines what groove in the record we are going to be experiencing. That's why I say it's analogous to one of those old choose-your-own-adventure novels. However, I don't want you to think or feel that this is some random like rolling of the dice, just roulette wheel, where you're just going through the time field, just tumbling and bumbling along and bouncing into things and trying new things. It's really not like that, or it's not intended to be that way, so I don't wish to convey it to you as if that's the way it is. Because what is supposed to be our experience, if we are completely put together and our higher faculties are activated, then our intended experience is to be able to see through the windshield as we drive the car, the vehicle of our consciousness, down the road of time. And I've spoken about this before at length. It's unfathomable that the great composer, great creator, that the architect of reality and architect of our physical embodiment would create a vehicle for us that literally had no windshield, that we would not be able to see where we are moving forward as we are flowing through time. To me, that is unfathomable. And I understand that that is a byproduct of the human genetic degradation, the process of domestication that has taken humanity from our wild, undomesticated format. In the same way that, dogs are domesticated forms of wolves and foxes, that the wild, undomesticated human has a set of perceptual faculties that I call the higher faculties that allow us to see through time, to perceive multidimensional or higher dimensional realities, and to effectively perceive and navigate the time field. And this is not just something that is supposed to be available or accessible to very, very special people. I understand in this time and place that if I asked everyone, hey, is it normal to be able to see through time, or is that only for very, very special, unusual people, anomalous people? Most people here would say, that's only for special people. And in fact, there are people that, they're called psychics or psychic readers. These people, their talents are considered to be so rare that they sell access to what they do. They're like, I know you don't have a windshield to look out through your car and tell if you're about to crash into a brick wall. So ask me. I've got like a little tiny unsmeared portion of my own windshield. I'll look out my car windshield and tell you what's going on in your life. That is not what was intended for us in terms of our journey of navigating the time field. What was intended was that each one of us would have our own set of activated and fully functioning and highly calibrated higher faculties, like a telescope, as special and wonderful as some big apparatus like the Hubble telescope, that it is finely calibrated and very far-seeing, and that allows each one of us to be able to perceive the future, our own future. It's unfathomable that we would be given this experience of being submerged in time and this body vehicle, and yet not be given the effective tools to navigate. So that's what a lot of what I teach about is. And I have a class called Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, another brief plug. And it's analogous to learning how to play an instrument, except your instrument is your physical body. And not just your physical body. Your physical body is comprised of many layers that include the layer of perception or pure insight. And that is what is located at what most people would call the brow chakra, right above your eyes at your forehead level. But that's not the last step on the journey. If the journey is like going up a ladder and we are raising our energy or climbing the ladder of frequency from the densest level, the physical level, the physical realm that we are in, touching my leg, this is physical matter, touching the table, this is physical matter. Up from there are successively less dense layers of consciousness that cannot even be defined as matter, but which are still layers of reality. And when we get up to the level of density or energetic excitation, that is the indigo or brow chakra, that is part of the higher faculties that we use to see through the windshield while we're driving down the road of time. And it's also, I like to say that is like the library card of the cosmos, that when you bring your energy to that aperture of your body, like if you have a fire hose and you finally put water through that fire hose, then you can then put that water anywhere you want it to go. So the aperture in the center of your forehead, or the outgrowth from that energy center, it's something like a tendril or an elephant's trunk, or a questing aspect of one's body. It's literally your attention, and attention comes from Greek atenuos, meaning to reach out towards. So this is, I like to say, it is like a cosmic telescope, and the telescope can also be a microscope. If I turn that tendril around and use it to go within, and to touch my own DNA structure, and to touch my own timelines, and to touch my own body, then I can literally use my library card of the cosmos to read and learn all about my own journey. And that is totally appropriate. That is what we are all supposed to be able to do. Just like imagine using your physical eyeball to look at the surface of your skin, or to look at your teeth, or to look at your toenail, to examine your own body and see how it is formed and see if it is healthy. Well, we are all supposed to be able to have this tendril of awareness that reaches out and touches various timelines and gives us information and feedback. Just like I can look at my toe and say, is my toe healthy? Is it well formed? Is it going in the right direction? I can look at all of these other aspects of self that are as much a part of me as my toe is a part of me. These timelines that I perceive with my higher dimensional faculties are just as much a part of me, quote unquote, how I define and identify myself, as my physical body. These are the aspects of time that are comprised within my body of time. And of course, each one of us has a body of time, and it is appropriate for each one of us to have activated higher faculties and be able to look at our own body and see the health and vitality of our own body. So I want to tell you about the Librarian of the Cosmos, because we just got our library cards, and I also want to tell you about the idea of being submerged within this larger metabolic system, metabolism that is made out of time, because we are like cells that live within a much larger being, and the being is wonderful, loving consciousness. It is not something that is other than self. It is self, just like we are little cells that are part of this planetary structure, individual humans on the surface of a planet. We are also individuated consciousnesses who are submerged within the time field, and the time field is the consciousness-based metabolism of a much larger entity. So in the same way that blood and oxygen and nutrients flow through our bloodstream, and that different chemical processes allow neural impulses to flow along our nerves of our neurology, so too does this larger entity have a metabolism where nutrients must flow in order to maintain the health and vitality of the overall being and body. And the nutrients that flow, these are consciousnesses, particles of consciousness, you and me, that when we flow along our timelines, moving at the correct rate and going in the correct direction, we add to the health and vitality of the overarching structure of entity that we live within. You could think of it as an entity, you could think of it as a system. However, I wish for you to think of it as a living, embodied being, not as a mere abstraction. This is not just like electrons flowing in a wire that lights up my light bulb in my ceiling here. This is a living being, it's living partnership. That's why I said it's more analogous to your individuated human self living on the surface of planet Earth. Both beings are alive. Both beings are interdependent, in interacting with one another, interrelated and interdependent. So just like inside of your own body, you have to have your little tiny mitochondria that are subcellular organelles functioning properly in order for your cells to function, in order for your macroscopic multicellular organic totality to function. So too does the time body of this larger cosmos need to have all of its little tiny cellular and subcellular substructures functioning correctly, flowing at the right rate, performing the right behaviors in order to have health and vitality of the totality. So basically, when humanity was domesticated, when the human genome was degraded about 10 or 20,000 years ago, and humanity lost our higher faculties and made it so that we couldn't just go through the experience of navigating the time field without hitting the membrane of death. That hitting the membrane of death, this is kind of like if you ever played that old child's game, Operation, where you have to use little tweezers to pull out little bones from, quote-unquote, the patient on the table. And if you hit the metal edge with the tweezers, it goes buzz. Then you know you have not done it right. Well, if you hit the membrane of death, then you know you have not performed your operation correctly. And this is what we are trying to do. However, this is not supposed to be trial and error where you have to go through every single possible possibility. That's why I say this is a bundle of timelines that is comprised of possibilities and probabilities, because probability, this is defined as the likelihood that something will happen. And if we were going back to that analogy of the view of the Hershey's Kiss time vortex from the top down, the central core timeline is the timeline that goes from the base of the structure through the pointy top, and it doesn't end, continues onward infinitely. That's where the fabric of space, time, and consciousness is stretched infinitely. So according to science's definition, and I'm not a scientist, and I say that all the time because when I came here as Aurora and I had all this information to share, I consciously made the choice to become an artist, a visual artist, and share it visually in that way, as opposed to writing papers that have to be peer reviewed, because I wanted to make certain that I could simply express my truth and what I had seen internally and not have to have a pat on the head from anyone else to be allowed to share this information. However, I use a lot of the vocabulary words of science in order to find a common ground. So science defines the singularity as the place, for example, at the center of a black hole, where the fabric of what science describes as space and time is stretched infinitely, and it's stretched out so much that all of the rules of the physical realm that science uses to describe our present level of experience here in the physical realm on Earth, all of those rules break down. They stop making sense. When you stretch the fabric of space-time and consciousness, in parentheses from Aurora, enough, what happens is all of those rules that describe the always and nevers of reality break apart, they fall apart, and now things that never happen, happen, and things that always happen don't happen. So I am defining the singularity as the zeroth dimension. It is the presence of all energy, all possibilities, and all probabilities. It is the least likely thing to happen, or the least likely place to be, because in that field of probabilities, there are many, many peripheral timelines, but there is only one central core timeline. And that's why it's the path of least likelihood, is the least likely thing to happen, that if we shot an arrow at a target, that it would go directly to the center of the target. It is more likely that it would go to someplace on the periphery. That is where there's a lot more surface area. So on the one hand, it's the least likely little tiny, I want to say cubic centimeter, little tiny wormhole at the top of this time vortex structure. And again, the topic for today is, this is a refinery of consciousness and refinery of experience. And what we are all attempting to do with our individual instruments and our individual experiences is to align our awareness, the needle of our awareness, so that we are now experiencing and lined up with that path of least likelihood. And the path of least likelihood doesn't end. It continues on indefinitely, in infinite amount of time. We stretch the fabric of time, space, and consciousness, and we don't stop stretching it. So it's not like, oh, I just stretched it to be 100 years long, or 200, or 300, or even 13 billion, or even 26 billion. I can stretch it infinitely. So the idea is that by aligning one's consciousness and one's awareness with that central core timeline and possibility, that you get to continue your flight or your trajectory through time endlessly. Now, to clarify, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll do all of that journey in the same format that you're currently in. So we'll talk about metamorphosis also. I don't want to forget about talking about the crown chakra too, because I spoke about the your central, your forehead, where you have your brow chakra, is one aspect of your higher faculties, but it's not the end of the journey. When you raise your energy one step higher on the energetic ladder, so you're going into a even less dense realm. Oh, I'm at my piano today. So if this is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and then violet. All right, so we're getting up to this level, almost the highest level of what we would define as quote-unquote human in this level of the spectrum. That violet connection, I like to say that's the plug where we plug in to the higher dimensional, less dense realms or areas of greater intelligence and organization. It is like the librarian of the cosmos. So if we have a library card, like our brow chakra, that's inner vision, insight. Many people are visionaries. Many people activate that aspect of their higher faculties through self-cultivation. However, it's not the end of the journey. Just like getting a library card is not equal to being a PhD graduate. getting a library card just means you now have access to all of the information that is in existence. But what if I shoved you into a big giant library and I gave you random pages to read? Page 3 from this book, page 27 from this book, page 107 from this book. I could really misprogram you. I could give you the very worst and most distorted view of reality by doing that, simply because I would not be presenting the information to you in a truthful sequence. So it's possible to tell a lie with facts. If I gave you a series of facts that were out of order, just like if I gave you a recipe, and instead of giving you the recipe with everything in order from the beginning, if the first part of the recipe said, place the batter in the oven, and then the second part said, turn on the oven to 475, and then the third part of the recipe said, now crack the eggs. None of that makes sense, because you know that the first order of operations is first crack the eggs, then make the batter, then turn on the oven, then put the cake in the oven. So that seems like common sense to anyone who's ever baked a cake. But let's say you've never experienced reality creation before. Let's say you don't know how to navigate the time field. Then simply getting the library card of the cosmos and being given random pages of insight from the cosmic library, you might not understand that that's not the way we're supposed to actually learn. So we are supposed to have the cosmic librarian that guides our inner vision and gives us the correct facts that we need for our journey in the correct order. And that this is what I mean when I say it's not supposed to be a trial and error exploration of every single possible iteration, or iteration is like a combination of ideas and events and energy and possibilities. Because if you have to do every single iteration, it's like saying, well, okay, we tried first putting the flour in the oven, then we tried first putting the water in, then just the eggs in, then just the vanilla extract. I mean, how laborious. How much easier is it to actually have an experienced chef that tells you, here's how you make the raw dough, here's how you put it in a greased cookie pan, here's how you put it in the actual oven, and here's how long you leave it, and that's how you get what you want. So that is what it is like when we are actually guided by the intelligence of the higher dimensional, more intelligent, more organized, less dense realm that flows to us through that connection at the crown chakra, or the highest level energy center that's in the octave that we define as human. Because when you get connected to the librarian, then the librarian tells you, first what you need to do is read this book. Then when you've digested and understood those insights, then you move on to this book. Then when you are done with those insights, then you move on to this book. Because all of this information, that is how I learned all of this information. So I didn't learn it from another earthly teacher. I didn't read a lot of other books or watch videos or some things on YouTube and then glean from that the portions of the information that I felt were most relevant and insert that into my belief system. No, what I did instead was I cultivated my energy, like getting gas in my gas tank. I activated the area of insight that is in my higher faculties so I could have my telescope activated, and I got guidance from the librarian of the cosmos that told me, hey, look over here, and now look over here, and now look over here, and now integrate all of those insights and synthesize it into either a painting or a verbal expression that can be shared with someone else, or understand it as music and harmonics. So this is my journey. This is what I've been doing for about the past 17 years. So the idea is just getting one's library card is not enough. You also have to get connected to the cosmic librarian and then actually go through the course of study. Actually read the books in the library in their correct order and take time to integrate and embody all of that information. And of course, when we do that, we change on a profound level. That is part of the metamorphosis. So now I'll go back to that point that I wanted to make, that the idea of continuity of consciousness. So when you align yourself, your attention, you're with the path of least likelihood, what that means is that you or one begins to metamorphosize into the format that will take you into the next experience, into the next realm. Because we will not always be here in this particular level of density, in this particular body that is made to navigate this level of density, that we are actually entering into a higher dimensional, less dense realm, and in order to get into that realm, we have to become less dense as well. And less dense, this has everything to do with changing state. So if we talk about the different states of matter, this is again science talk. We've got solid, then liquid, then gas, then plasma, then beam. These are going from more dense to less dense up the ladder of the spectrum. And there's even something more dense than physical matter that I'm touching my table right now, and that is called a Bose-Einstein condensate. And the amazing thing, and this is what I teach with Flying Rainbow Lasagna, non-duality, is that there are two different pathways to go on in order to achieve unity consciousness. That it's not just all about getting onto this path of least likelihood and going towards that singularity or the place of infinite stretchiness and infinite possibilities. There's also a pathway towards unity consciousness through entropy. That where that stretchy fabric is stretched infinitely, that is the convergence point of all timelines and all energy. It's the presence of everything. It is total energy, total awareness. Everything that has ever existed and that ever will exist exists there at that place and overlaps. So it's an incredible little tiny segment of reality where everything literally exists. And think about what the opposite or the complement of that would be. It would be non-existent or entropy. A total loss of energy, no awareness, no movement, total coldness as opposed to total energy. And that state exists as a Bose-Einstein condensate. When matter is brought down to an extremely slow rate or an extremely cold rate, you could think they're exactly the same thing. If you're going slow, you're cold. And if you are going fast, if your molecular motion is faster, then you have heat. So if we bring matter down to a very slow rate of movement, and almost no movement occurs, and it's just a tiny fraction of a degree above 0 degrees Kelvin, then what happens is the atoms of the matter begin to overlap and kind of smear on top of themselves in terms of their behavior and probabilistic behavior, and they begin to act like one atom, not like many different individuals, but they act like one thing, and that is unity consciousness. So on this spectrum of matter, in the trajectory that consciousness or awareness can go, it can go towards total energy, going towards that state of the path of least likelihood and the pointy end of the time vortex, or energy can also go into a state of entropy, which is loss of energy. I'm sorry, I should have said consciousness can go into a state of entropy, which is loss of energy. And that would be like going into a state of non-existence. And in that state of non-existence, that consciousness also achieves or experiences unity consciousness. So this Flying Rainbow Lasagna, if you're new to everything that I speak about here, Flying Rainbow Lasagna is a shape of non-duality, and it actually has two pointy convergence ends, and the two different ends represent both energy and entropy, and there is an equal oscillation between these two positions. And it is understanding that in our world, this is how we can understand the presence of both good and evil, or how good and evil can both be subsets of God or divine intelligence. That's like one of the first things that little kids ask, Mommy, Daddy, if God exists and God is good, then how can good and evil both be part of God if God is everywhere? These like little kids ask really good questions. And the answer is that good and evil, these are like two opposing directions or trajectories. One is going towards greater levels of energy and organization and awareness, and one is going towards lower levels, losing energy, losing consciousness, losing awareness, instead of going towards light or energy or awareness. Whenever I say light, you can think ideas. The same way that a fiber optics cable carries ideas and words or movies. That darkness is ignorance. It is lack of understanding. It is lack of awareness. And again, I'm not here to spread more duality by saying, oh, you've got two options, light or dark. No, no, no. I'm trying to say that basically, like that old adage, all roads lead to Rome, that both of these pathways lead to unity consciousness. However, they are experienced, the unity consciousness is experienced differently in these two different states. So again, the topic is we are submerged right now within a refinery of consciousness. And this refinery, what is being refined is certain personality characteristics. And it is very much like a lens that is focusing you or each one of us into our true form. And the true form, it's not just what the physical form looks like, it's also the true form of our belief system, of the flow of energy, the metabolic flow of energy throughout our own body, what we think and what we feel and what we do. That when we are metamorphosized and refined into this perfected form of who we are, then we are adding to the health and vitality of the overarching entity or systemic structure that we live within, the time field, which is a living being. So what we are trying to do with our individual journeys in terms of cultivating ourselves, becoming the correct set of characteristics, not hitting into the membrane of death and going into a state of entropy, but instead being saved like you save a term paper. So this is not being saved like the Christian saving. And no offense to any biblical literalist Christians out there. I must make a distinction, however, that that's not the type of religiosity that I'm speaking about here. Because often when people talk about being saved, it's like, are you worthy? Are you good enough? Are you this enough? Are you that enough? This is not like that. This is more like if we say that living your life is like writing a term paper or writing a doctoral thesis, that you are going through the editing process with each experience that you have and each choice that you make, with each emotional experience that you have and that you must process. Like every conversation or interaction with another living being is an emotional conversation, like a plate of food that one then has to digest and come to understand, and that's part of the fuel for our journey. So as we go through life, we are digesting these plates of food and refining them, and that's part of writing this important paper or this important thesis that we are working on. And we continually edit it throughout our journey through the time field. And let's say every time you hit the membrane of death and have to circulate back to the beginning and try it again, that is, major edits are required. And when we have completed the editing process, when we've written everything we want in the paper and we say, this is what I'm trying to convey, these are the ideas I'm trying to put forth, there's no spelling mistakes, there's no grammar mistakes, and this contains all of the information in the format and narrative structure that I require, then you hand it in to your professor. You hand it in to, the great composer, to the higher dimensional consciousness, and that is when I say being saved, it means there are no more edits required. Just like when we do digital editing, because I know this is not for anyone who did their thesis, 40 years ago, but for someone who has done it within the time where computer digital word processors exist, that you write the basic structure, just dump all the information out with all the spelling mistakes, and then you save it. And then you go back and you edit out the spelling mistakes and you save that new version. And each time you go back into the paper, you refine it. And you might say, oh, this is gobbledygook. Cut this sentence out. We don't need that there. That flows a lot better now. Or you might say, I need to put in a paragraph here that speaks more about this because this does not have clarity. So you go through that. That's the process of living your life over and over through these various different iterations or combinations of choices and behaviors and actions, going through it. And sometimes it's about emotional experiences with other people. Sometimes it is about learning to avoid pathogens. If you think about what a little tiny baby is doing, why that learning curve is so steep at the outer periphery of the time field, we have to learn before we even become verbal how not to die of pathogens. That's like getting your immune system online. There's all of these different microorganisms that as soon as you come out of the womb start to attack your body and want to come inside. And it's necessary to develop all of the defenses to all of those pathogens. And then once we develop language structure, then the learning curve gets easier because other people around us can tell us how to keep ourselves safe. Like if we were living in a simple hunter-gatherer society, our parents could tell us, never eat this poisonous berry over here. Always eat this delicious leaf over here, right? Wow, it's a lot harder, steeper learning curve if you don't have anybody telling you what to eat, like this is poison, this is delicious. In our present domesticated format, however, we have our parents telling us different life lessons, like don't step out in traffic, look both ways before you cross the street, and other basics, things we almost take for granted at this point. So we are undergoing this process of refinement and metamorphosis. And the refinement is analogous to this editing of the term paper. And when we have got the term paper, down pat and everything is under control, then we are ready to press save, to finalize it. Like that is the best way I can say it. So we are metamorphosizing also in terms of what we're experiencing in the physical body. That this is not the end of what we're going to be experiencing, having a physical body that eats physical food and poops it out and has a physical metabolism, that this is one stage of our development in exactly the same way that an insect goes through various stages of metamorphosis. So an insect begins as a little egg, and then it grows into a caterpillar state, like the worm state, and then eventually it becomes the pupal state. A pupa, this is like the chrysalis of a caterpillar wrapped up in its cocoon and transforming and metamorphosizing inside, being completely dissolved and disarranged, and then emerging in its adult winged state, having gained an additional dimension and gained an additional degree of freedom. This is why I call this radio show Birth of a New Dimension. So we are all collectively giving birth to this new dimension. It is a new dimension of consciousness where we are all metamorphosizing from our versions of self. That's like the little caterpillar. Little caterpillar can only scoot across the surface of a leaf. Caterpillars don't jump off the surface of a leaf and go wherever they want to go. They have to laboriously crawl along. And that is what humans do right now through time. That if you want to go to any place in time, you have to crawl along through all of the intervening, connecting experiences. Like if you want to get all the way to, if it's July 20th today and you want to get to July 27th next week, you, as a little caterpillar stuck to the surface of time, have to crawl through all of those seconds, minutes, hours, and days before you get to that moment. Right now, I'm presuming that most of my audience is not shaped like a butterfly, a higher dimensional time self that can flit from flower to flower. That means if you want to be here at 4:55 p.m. on July 20th, and then you want to fly directly to whatever, 1:23 p.m. on July 27th, you can do that as a higher dimensional, metamorphosized, adult, winged being. So this is, again, what most people would consider to be superhuman. However, being what we define as human. Here, I'm at my little piano here. Here's the human octave. Everything from all of those notes or those colors of the rainbow in that particular slice of the visual spectrum is what we define as human. However, just like there are states of matter that are more dense than our current physical experience and less dense, light, this is a less dense level of the experience of matter, and the Bose-Einstein condensate is the more dense experience. Just like that, we are transitioning from this octave that is defined, humans are defined by this octave, and this is how dense and how physical we are, and we're moving into a higher dimensional, less dense realm. And in order to do that, in order to do that, one aligns oneself with the path of least likelihood and undergoes this metamorphosis. So let me talk about ancient Egypt. The religion or idea of the afterlife of ancient Egypt is often described as a funerary religion, or something that was very focused on the afterlife. And I feel like that is a bit simplistic and a bit distorted, because what the ancient Egyptians understood was that death was a metamorphosis, and that, and I'm actually not telling everyone that in order to metamorphosize, you have to die and be mummified. We're in a different time now. So the Egyptians had developed, let's go way, way back. Before the Egyptians, nobody died. This is also the understanding of the ancient Egyptian myth of Osiris and the invention of death. So if we think of this ancient Egyptian myth, it says Osiris was an immortal god who lived with his immortal wife, Isis, way back in the time when no death ever existed. And then Set, who was another jealous god who was red and came from the planet of Mars, destroyed Osiris and invented death. And that then Isis picked up Osiris and put him back together and did some magical sex magic and reanimated him. So if we look at that as an analogy, not as a literal story of individual characters, but if we say Osiris was the culture of consciousness that existed on the planet before the Martian invasion that degraded the human genome and invented death. Basically, everyone here was immortal. I refer to the sophisticated antediluvian worldwide culture that existed here. It's known now mythologically as Atlantis, but it wasn't just on one continent. It was across the entire surface of this planet, and nobody died. It's also immortalized or remembered as the myth of the Garden of Eden, a time when humans were friends with all animals and didn't have to eat other things in order to stay alive. So basically, that's before the genetic degradation. Humans were light eaters. Humans ingested all of the nourishment and energy for their own metabolisms directly from the stellar network, directly from the network of light, directly from the higher dimensional, less dense, greater organized realm, without requiring the intermediary of plants like chloroplasts as catching light and turning it into physical starches, or animals to eat the chloroplasts and then you eat the animals. None of those cumbersome, clunky intermediaries were required because we all had fully activated higher faculties that could eat light directly. So there was a completely different experience, not only of, if you are not constantly on the hunt for food, you can focus your efforts on finer things, not only on that, but in the sense of domesticating plants and animals for the convenience of being able to ingest them whenever you want them, and that they would be delectable to ingest when you actually want to eat them. So what we currently use as grain, like wheat and corn, these are the domesticated versions over many thousands of years of wild cereals that grew. And if you looked at a blade of, if you looked at grass, like growing out of your regular front lawn, and you looked at when the grass goes to seed, that is more like what these original grains looked like. They looked like very delicate, feathery little seeds, not like a big, giant, honkin', juicy ear of corn that you can sink your teeth into. So you understand that over many thousands of years, humanity has controlled the breeding of plants and animals for our own convenience. And this is a reflection of humanity, that ourselves or themselves, humanity itself being controlled by the beings that domesticated humanity, that humans aren't able to act in a completely free and unencumbered way, partnering with the people that they wish to partner with and structuring human society in the way that they wish to structure it, because there are cultivators cultivating humanity and domesticating humanity. And then that's why humans lost their higher faculties, and that's why humans then had to have a steady supply of plants and animals to eat. And you need a steady supply of plants and animals. What do? You domesticate them, and you grow them in your garden, and you grow them, keep them as your domesticated animals. This is called agriculture, and this is the beginning of quote-unquote civilization. All of this matters because it's part of the symphony of life. When you domesticate another organism, what you are literally doing is controlling its behavior and controlling its level of consciousness, or the level of consciousness that it has access to. So if I say to different plants, I'm like, okay, big fat seeds over here, I want to breed you with big fat seeds over here to make even bigger, fatter seeds that I can eventually eat like sweet, juicy corn. I can do that. However, I recognize that what I'm doing is I'm not simply allowing those plants to choose their own marriage partners. I'm imposing them. It's an arranged marriage. I'm saying, yes, you don't get to marry for love. You get to marry for my convenience because I want these two families to come together. And that is the story of humans domesticating plants and animals. So, I face a lot of criticism from a particular sector of society. I share my ideas on the radio and on various videos and webinars, and there are many vegetarians and vegans, and they come up to me and they say that I'm a wrong, bad person. They try to shame me because I eat animals. Yes, I eat animals, and also I do not give dietary advice to other people. Like, I don't expect my particular diet to work for other people. Everybody is built differently, just like there are cats and there are sea manatees that require totally different, biological, metabolic structures for health. Same thing with humans. Humans can be as divergent as cats or sea manatees and require different diets. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And so as a responsible sharer of information and like a template for how others can live their life, I don't pretend to say, hey, everybody has to walk and talk and eat exactly like me. No, far from it. If you listen to my broadcasts and if you're a long-term listener, you know that I'm all about encouraging self-responsibility and unique approaches to life, just like being a jazz musician. So here's a good analogy. This is Herbie Hancock when he was he's really well known now. When he was first coming up in the jazz world, Miles Davis was already very well established. Herbie Hancock went to play for Miles Davis, and he asked him, so Miles Davis ran the band, and Herbie Hancock asked him, what should I play for this song? And Miles Davis said to him, you should play your piano, meaning even though I'm the band leader, I am not going to tell you what notes to play. Like, you figure it out yourself. That's called being a jazz musician. So that is my approach when I say to other people, when I tell them about the flying rainbow lasagna and achieving higher mental states and activating your own higher faculties. I am not going to tell you what notes to play on your piano. Your piano, your instrument, is your body. I'm not going to tell you what decisions to make in life or what you should and shouldn't do. I am simply going to tell you that, like, these are what musical notes are. This is what music theory is, or this is what a paintbrush is. This is how you can make sounds or make marks on a canvas. But I'm not going to tell you what to play or how to play it. That is up to your own particular artistry. And the reason for that is we are all on this soul migration. Just like geese flying in formation going across the sky, we're all individuals and we are flying together in formation. That's what I'm saying. We're individual cells that are part of a much larger metabolism of consciousness, of energy flowing through the time field. And each one of us needs to be radically self-responsible. That means you're responsible for everything that is inside of the boundaries of your own epidermis, and also your own emanations, your connection to the time field. Because you're not just swimming around in your own private kiddie pool. Each one of us, my voice connects with reality. The vibrating strings of my DNA are constantly singing and dancing and connecting to reality. I mean, I laugh because even if I was just sitting quietly in a corner, not making any noise, not doing anything, I think anyone who I was around would still be able to tell that there's flying rainbow lasagna going on, because it is happening on a subcellular level. It is happening constantly in the nuclei of my cells. I'm dancing like a flying rainbow lasagna all the time. And this dance is the connection of my awareness as I am traveling through time. And basically this dance is a new dance movement that allows anybody who's doing the dance to rearrange their experiences of reality. It is very much like putting in new variables, new things that can possibly happen in order, instead of just going in the same old tired pathways. Like if we've already explored pathway 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100, 700, 7 million, 7 trillion. We've explored 7 trillion pathways. It's very boring already. Let's explore a new pathway. The pathway of what happens when we take the flying rainbow lasagna and use it to rearrange our DNA. So, okay, epigenetics and wonderful people who study epigenetics like Bruce Lipton, these teachers are helping us to understand that we are not fated like the fate of our genes, genetic fatalism. If something is written in your genes, like a disease like cancer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you get cancer, that you develop it, that you manifest it. It's in the blueprint, but just because there's a blueprint that says in the house, oh, we must build the bathroom and put in pink and black tiling, you don't actually have to put in that color scheme. You can put in a different color scheme. So you can transform how this is manifested. That's the whole idea. And what determines whether something is manifested from the blueprint or whether the blueprint is followed exactly is largely our consciousness, our choices, our emotional state. Things that science isn't ready to really measure and quantify yet. But if you look at identical twins that come from the exact same cell or egg that has split in two, they're genetically identical, but they do not have identical life experiences and they do not develop identical diseases. Sometimes one twin will get cancer and one twin will be perfectly healthy. So this is how we can understand. It's not just a question of your genes fating you to experience something. So there's something more that's going on than just what is written in your DNA. And the something more is your willpower and your desire and the dance that you are doing as you travel through time. So, okay, the ancient Egyptians, they came out of the time of immortality. And what the ancient Egyptians did was developed a compensatory mode, a form of technology that would do what everyone did naturally a long time ago. So it's just like if everyone used to be able to see perfectly clearly and then they developed nearsightedness and then they had to invent glasses or corrective lenses so everyone could see. That is what the process of mummification is all about. It's like corrective lens. It's like glasses. It is a set of technologies and approaches that allows a person to transcend the experience of death. The Flying Rainbow Lasagna is another approach that allows us to transcend the necessity or abrogate the necessity of hitting the membrane of death. Because you don't have to just keep trying every single possible iteration and then, oh, trial and error, it didn't work, go back to the drawing board, try again, try to keep baking the cake until finally it looks like a cake. What you can actually do is activate your higher faculties, learn from the higher dimensional librarian, and actually bake the cake correctly. And in this case, baking the cake, that means making reality. So I have a personal motivation for sharing all of these ideas with everyone. And what, like, Aurora, why in the world do you even speak about all this stuff and make these drawings and make these videos? Because I want everybody to make delicious, good cakes. And I don't want it to have to take the next 13 billion years, because the more delicious your reality cake is, the more delicious the collective reality is. I use this analogy all the time. We are all inadvertently giving our creative energy to aspects of reality creation we don't want, like babies being born with brain cancer. The more that we take radical self-responsibility and actually manifest the realities we wish to experience, the better our collective experience becomes. And this can be a wonderful restaurant with delicious cake. Please keep dancing like Flying Rainbow Lasagnas. Thank you.